The question that changes everything. Picture this: early morning, a mountain slope in the Alps. Darkness hasn't yet retreated, the sky is just beginning to turn deep blue, and there, a person, alone, on narrow skis, looking down, where the slope disappears into the fog. The heartbeat is so loud it seems the mountains can hear it, and then, one step forward. What makes a person take that step? Not money, not fame, not a coach standing behind them. Something else, something ancient and profound, for which science still hasn't found a precise name. Today, we're talking about the Winter Olympic Games of 2026, but not the way the news talks about them. We're going deeper. Why does winter give birth to the most daring athletes on the planet? Why have ice and snow become the arena for testing the human spirit? And what is it about February 2026 in Milan and Cortina d'Ampezzo that will make the whole world hold its breath once again? This isn't a sports report. It's a conversation about human nature, about why we challenge gravity, the cold, and our own fear. And if you're curious to dig deeper, hit subscribe right now, because it only gets more fascinating from here. Each episode peels back a new layer. There is one idea that runs through all great traditions of the world, from Norse sagas to Japanese philosophy. Every element of nature is more than just water, fire, or wind. It's a living force that reveals something hidden within a person, something that in ordinary life stays buried under layers of habit and fear. Winter is the most honest of all elements. It tolerates no pretense. On snow and ice you can't hide. Everything is laid bare: willpower, precision, breath, fear. That's why the peoples of the north, the Scandinavians, Finns, Norwegians, created most of the disciplines we now call winter sports. For them, it wasn't entertainment. It was a way to survive and become truly human. Skis appeared in Scandinavia more than 8,000 years ago. 8,000! Cave paintings in Norway show people on skis hunting, traveling, fighting on those narrow wooden planks. And here's a lesser-known fact. The first written mention of skis in a military context comes from the year 1206, when Norwegian warriors on skis served as scouts during a civil war. They were the world's first ski troops. So when the first Winter Olympic Games were held in Chamonix in 1924, it wasn't the invention of something new. Only 258 athletes from 16 countries took part, and among them were just 11 women. Today, more than 2,900 athletes compete at the Winter Games, a number that speaks volumes. And now, in February 2026, the Olympic flame will once again light up the skies over Italy. 116 medal events, 16 sports, each with its own soul, its own story, its own mystery. These games will also be the most geographically expansive in the history of the Winter Olympics, spanning over 20,000 square kilometers of competition venues. Alpine skiing speed, gravity, leaning downhill at an angle that takes your breath away. Alpine skiing is one of the most spectacular sports on the planet. It made its Olympic debut in 1936 in Garmisch-Partenkirchen, Germany. The first champion was Franz Pfeiffer, and in 2022, Switzerland's Marco Odermatt claimed the gold. Athletes reach speeds of up to 140 kilometers per hour. Imagine that, faster than most cars on European highways. And yet the athlete has nothing but two thin strips of carbon under their feet and their own body as balance. Here's a fact few people know. In downhill skiing, the difference between gold and missing the podium altogether is often less than 1/10 of a second. That's less time than it takes a person to blink. One wrong arm movement, one slight error in body angle, and 4 years of preparation vanish into the alpine air. The culture of speed was born in the Alps, where for centuries people descended mountains not for sport, but for survival. At the 2026 Games, the main favorites in Bormio and Cortina d'Ampezzo are Austria, Switzerland, and Italy. But Cortina is a special place. It already hosted the Winter Olympics back in 1956. 70 years later, the same slopes will once again witness Olympic history. Biathlon. This is where the true magic of opposites begins. You are skiing as hard as you can, your heart is ready to burst out of your chest, your lungs are burning, and suddenly you have to stop, raise your rifle, and hit the target. The target sizes are brutal. In standing position it's just 45 millimeters across, and in prone it's only 30 millimeters, about the size of a coin. All this while your heart is pounding at around 80 beats per minute. Biathlon grew out of the military traditions of northern nations. Norwegian and Swedish soldiers trained exactly this way, skiing combined with precision shooting. It was literally everything they needed to survive: move unseen, calm down, lock onto the target. The sport entered the Olympic program in 1960, but Norwegian soldiers had been racing on skis with rifles and shooting in competition formats since the 18th century. Here's an interesting detail. For every missed target, an athlete either gets a 1-minute penalty added to their time or must ski an additional 150-meter penalty loop, depending on the race format. In a pursuit race, that can be the difference between first place and dropping all the way to 20th. This ruthless mechanic is what makes biathlon one of the most nerve-wracking sports to watch. The result changes right before your eyes, and every shot is a tiny drama. Norway, Germany, and France traditionally set the tone here. The competitions will be held in Anterselva, South Tyrol, home to one of the most beautiful biathlon arenas in the world, the Sutterol Arena, at about 1,600 meters above sea level. Bobsleigh 2 or 4 people packed inside a metal shell, rushing through an ice tunnel, up to 150 kilometers per hour, around 30 corners on a single track. G-forces of up to 5 GE, about as much as a fighter pilot experiences in a tight turn. 5 times Earth's gravity slams into every body in the sled as it dives into a steep curve. This sport was born in St. Moritz, Switzerland, at the end of the 19th century, when tourists began modifying ordinary sleds for fun, and created something incomparably more terrifying and beautiful. The first official bobsleigh club was founded in 1897 in St. Moritz, and in 1904 the world's first artificial ice track there hosted its first races. The sport made its Olympic debut at the 1924 Winter Games in Chamonix. German pilot Francesco Friedrich is an absolute powerhouse in this sport. He won Olympic gold in both the 2-man and 4-man events at Pyeongchang 2018 and Beijing 2022. 4 Olympic titles in a row. No other bobsledder in history has come close to that level of dominance. At the 2026 Games, he once again arrives as a top favorite for gold. Ice hockey. A team game born on the frozen lakes of Canada. Ice hockey entered the Olympic program back in 1920, first at the Summer Games, and later became a cornerstone of the Winter Olympics. Canada were the first champions. Finland took gold in 2022, breaking Canada's long-standing dominance. Here's a number that shows the scale of it. A hockey puck can fly at speeds of over 100 kilometers per hour when shot by a professional. At that pace, a goalie has less than 0.4 of a second to respond. The human nervous system simply cannot process and react consciously in that time. Goalies perform on pure reflex and trained anticipation. The hockey matches in Milan will be played at the new Santa Giulia Arena, and the men's gold medal game will be the final sporting event before the closing ceremony. The favorites for gold are Canada, Finland, Sweden, and the USA, and Canada will be hungry for revenge. Figure skating. When sport becomes poetry. This is the only Olympic sport where judges are responsible not just for the result, but for beauty itself. And here a remarkable historical detail appears. Figure skating made its Olympic debut back in 1908 at the London Summer Games, 16 years before the first Winter Olympics. That means figure skaters performed indoors in a covered arena, while all the other athletes were competing outdoors under the open sky. Figure skating was born on the frozen canals of Vienna and the ice of St. Petersburg, where aristocrats turned simple ice walks into true art. The very word figure comes from an old scoring system in which skaters traced geometric patterns on the ice, 8s, circles, spirals, and judges literally crawled across the ice with magnifying glasses, studying the precision and cleanliness of every edge. In 2022, the gold medal in men's singles went to American skater Nathan Chen. At the 2026 Games in Milan, the world will be watching young American Ilya Malinin, the only skater on the planet currently landing a quadruple axel in competition. This is a jump that, just 5 years ago, most experts still called physically impossible for a human being. Curling players slide heavy granite stones across the ice toward a target, while their teammates furiously sweep the ice with brooms to change the stone's path. It looks unhurried, but behind that calm exterior lies strategy as complex as chess. Here's a fact that surprises almost everyone. Each curling stone weighs nearly 20 kilos and is made from a special type of granite found in just one place on Earth, Ailsa Craig, an island off the coast of Scotland. This granite is so dense and uniform that it has no real equivalent anywhere else. The entire world of curling quite literally depends on a single rock in the Scottish Sea. Curling originated in Scotland in the 16th century, when frozen ponds served as natural rinks. It returned to the Olympic program for good in 1998. At the 2022 Games, the women's gold went to Great Britain and the men's to Sweden. Events at the 2026 Games will be held at the Cortina Olympic Stadium. Among the favorites are Sweden, Canada, Switzerland, and Great Britain. Skeleton. The athlete lies face down on a small sled weighing about 43 kilos and hurtles head first down an icy track. The speed is over 130 kilometers per hour. The distance from the athlete's head to the ice wall is just a few centimeters. There is no steering wheel, no brakes. You control the ride only with tiny shoulder leans and pressure from your knees. Skeleton first appeared at the Olympic Games in 1928 in St. Moritz. But then something strange happened. The sport disappeared from the program for almost 40 years and only returned in 2002. The reason was that competition was only possible on the famous Cresta Run track in St. Moritz. Once artificial ice tracks were built around the world, skeleton came back, and it has stayed ever since. One version of the name's origin is that skeleton comes from the word skeleton, because the early metal sleds looked like a bare skeleton. Another theory traces it to the Norwegian word skjelton, describing a type of sled. At the 2026 Games, the favorites are Germany and Great Britain. Cross-country skiing, ski jumping, and Nordic combined, the heart of the Olympics. Cross-country skiing is the very essence of the Winter Games. No equipment, no ice, no mechanics, just a person, snow, and endurance. This sport has been in the program since the first Games in 1924. The first gold was won by Norwegian Thorleif Haug. In 2022, Norway's Therese Johaug and Finland's Ivo Niskanen were the best. A favorite fact about Norwegian dominance: at the 2018 Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang, Norway won 39 medals, more than any country had ever won at a single Winter Games. A nation of fewer than 6 million people outperformed Germany, the United States, and Canada. It's a phenomenon that has inspired scientific studies and books. Ski jumping was born in Norway, a country where the winter air seems made for flight. Athletes soar more than 130 meters and stay airborne for about 7 seconds. In that time, they cover a distance comparable to a quarter of a football field. Japanese jumper Noriaki Kasai competed in 8 consecutive Olympic Games. Nordic combined is perhaps the most demanding sport on the program. First a ski jump, then a 10-kilometer cross-country race. It is still the only men-only sport at the Winter Games. The first Olympic champion was, again, Thorleif Haug. The most recent gold in 2022 was won by Norway's Jørgen Grabach. Norway, Germany, and Austria are the leading powers. Luge and speed skating, pure speed. Luge is one athlete, one sled, an icy track, and speeds exceeding 140 kilometers per hour. The difference from bobsleigh is fundamental. In luge, the athlete faces upward, while in skeleton they go head first, face down. It entered the Olympic program in 1964 in Innsbruck. Germans Johannes Ludwig and Nathalie Geisenberger won gold in 2022. For the 2026 Games, the favorites are Germany, Austria, and Italy. Speed skating is pure meditation in motion. Athletes glide around a 400-meter oval, reaching speeds of up to 60 kilometers per hour. Here's a striking fact. Dutch skater Niels van der Poel won gold in the 5,000 meters at the Beijing 2022 Olympics with a world record, improving on his previous result from the last Games. He even eased off near the finish because he already knew victory was secured. That's not arrogance. It's a level of self-control most people can hardly imagine. Short track is the same sport, but turned into controlled chaos. A tight 111-meter oval, shoulder to shoulder, where any mistake changes everything. Disqualifications, collisions, and sudden surges from last place to first, all within a single race. It became an Olympic sport in 1992. South Korea, China, and the Netherlands are the dominant forces in this discipline. Skeleton. The athlete lies face down on a small sled weighing around 43 kilograms and hurtles head first down an icy chute. The speed exceeds 130 kilometers per hour. The distance from the athlete's head to the ice wall is just a few centimeters. There is no steering wheel, no brakes. You steer only with tiny shifts of the shoulders and pressure from your knees. Skeleton first appeared at the Olympic Games in 1928 in St. Moritz. Then something strange happened. The sport vanished from the program for almost 40 years and only returned in 2002. The reason was that competitions could be held only on the famous Cresta Run track in St. Moritz. Once artificial ice tracks were built around the world, skeleton came back, and it has never left since. One version of the name's origin is that skeleton comes from the word skeleton, because the early metal sleds resembled a bare rib cage. Another theory links it to a corrupted Norwegian term for a type of sled. At the 2026 Games, the favorites are Germany and Great Britain. Cross-country skiing. 8,000 years. Think about that number. Not 80, not 800. For 8,000 years, humans have been moving over snow on 2 wooden planks. When rock carvings of skiers were discovered in Norway, scientists at first refused to believe the dating. Too ancient, too similar to us today, but this is the secret of cross-country skiing. It is not a sports invention, it is a continuation of instinct. Humans did not step into skis for medals. They stepped into skis to survive, to catch an animal, to reach the next village before they froze. Every skier who lines up at the start in Cortina carries this memory in their muscles, even if they have no idea it's there. Cross-country skiing is a sport you cannot cheat. There are no spectacular tricks, no judges with scorecards. There is a timer, there is a distance, there is your body against the mountain, the snow, and everyone else. 50 kilometers in classic style is not a race, it is a confession. At the 30th kilometer, when your lungs are burning, your legs are turning to wood, and the gap to the leader is growing, a person discovers things about themselves that would never be revealed in ordinary life. In this sport, Norway is like gravity, it simply exists. Klæbo, Northug in his time, Bjørgen, these are not just athletes. They are forces of nature that occur in Norway with the same regularity as December snow. A small country with fewer people than Moscow produces world-class champions with conveyor belt consistency. Why? Because children there still go to school on skis. Because skiing is not a hobby, it is a language. Yet every 4 years, someone appears who dares to challenge this gravity, and Milan Cortina 2026 is exactly the moment when a new generation will have its say. Cross-country skiing. 8,000 years. Think about that number, not 80, not 800. For 8,000 years, humans have been moving over snow on 2 wooden planks. When rock carvings of skiers were discovered in Norway, scientists at first refused to believe the dating. Too ancient, too similar to us today. But this is the secret of cross-country skiing. It is not an invention of sport. It is a continuation of instinct. Humans did not step into skis for medals. They stepped into skis to survive, to catch an animal, to reach the next village before they froze. Every skier who lines up at the start in Cortina carries this memory in their muscles, even if they have no idea it's there. Cross-country skiing is a sport you cannot cheat. There are no spectacular tricks, no judges with scorecards. There is a timer, there is a distance, there is your body against the mountain, the snow, and everyone else. 50 kilometers in classic style is not a race, it is a confession. At the 30th kilometer, when your lungs are burning, your legs are turning to wood, and the gap to the leader is growing, a person discovers things about themselves that would never be revealed in ordinary life. In this sport, Norway is like gravity, it simply exists. Klæbo, Northug in his time, Bjørgen. These are not just athletes. They are forces of nature that appear in Norway with the same regularity as December snow. A small country with fewer people than Moscow produces world-class champions with conveyor belt consistency. Why? Because children there still go to school on skis. Because skiing is not a hobby, it is a language. Yet every 4 years, someone appears who dares to challenge this gravity. And Milan Cortina 2026 is exactly the moment when a new generation will have its say. Speed skating. In the 17th century, the canals in the Netherlands would freeze. This happened every winter, and it changed everything. Because when water turned to ice, people strapped on wooden and later iron skates and began moving along the canals faster than horses on the road. It wasn't sport, it was logistics. A way to deliver goods, reach the market, visit the next town. Out of this practical necessity grew what we now call speed skating, and that is why the Netherlands still owns this sport with an ease that borders on unfairness. They don't train speed skaters, they grow them, from generation to generation, from town to town, from frozen canal to Olympic oval. The classic distances, 500 meters, 1,000, 1,500, 5,000, 10,000 meters, are the architecture of the sport. Each distance demands a different kind of person. A sprinter in the 500 meters is pure explosive power, Hundredths of a second, muscles like springs. A distant skater in the 10,000 is a monk. A person with a steel mind who can endure pain for 13 minutes and still count every lap with metronomic precision. But the most intriguing event on the Milan Cortina program is the mass start. That's where everything becomes unpredictable. 16 people on the same oval at once, tactics, positioning, hiding in the slipstream, attacking at the perfect moment. This is no longer just a pure speed event, it is a game. And here Dutch dominance stops being absolute, because in the mass start, it's not only speed that wins. The winner is the one who knows how to read the race. Ski mountaineering. There are sports created by people, and there are sports created by mountains. Ski mountaineering belongs to the second category. It is the only discipline at the Winter Games that does not take place on a manicured course with safety nets and officials every 20 meters. Here, the course is the mountain itself, real, alive, with changing snow, knife-edge ridges, and wind strong enough to knock you off your feet, and you have to climb it, then plunge back down faster than everyone else. Technically, it looks like this. Special touring skis with climbing skins, strips of synthetic pile that let you move uphill without sliding backward. On the ascent, your boot is fixed only at the toe, with the heel free, like when you walk. You go up the mountain like an alpinist. Then, at the summit or on a pass, comes the transition zone. You rip off the skins with your hands, snap your heel into the binding, and turn from mountain hiker into downhill skier. And you drop. It sounds simple. It feels like something entirely different, because all of this happens on the limit. Skinning uphill on skis is work for the heart and lungs at a level most people experience only in a nightmare. Heart rate above 180, legs on fire, and at the same time you still have to think about whether you pulled the skin off correctly, whether your binding clicked in properly, because a single mistake in the transition and your rival is 20 seconds up the course, never to be caught. At Milan Cortina 2026, ski mountaineering will make its Olympic debut for the first time in history. And that is symbolic, because right here in the Dolomites, this sport has lived as part of the culture for generations. For locals, a Sunday ski tour is like a walk in the park is for everyone else. Except that their park is a vertical wall of rock and snow 3,000 meters high. Italy, France, Switzerland, Spain, countries where mountains are not scenery but a way of life, will line up as favorites. But this discipline will remind us that Olympic sport is not only about stadiums and grandstands. Sometimes it is about a human and a mountain, one-on-one. Slopestyle freestyle skiing. Slopestyle did not come from the mountains, it came from the cities. From California skate parks and the snowboard culture of the 90s, where young people looked at handrails, stair sets, and ramps not as urban furniture but as opportunities for tricks. Then someone looked at a mountain slope and thought, what if we did the same thing, but in snow? That's how slopestyle was born, a sport whose name literally means style on the slope. A long course filled with features, rails, boxes, big kicker jumps. You ride from top to bottom, choosing your own line through each section. No one tells you exactly how to do a trick. You decide for yourself which rail to take, which trick to throw in the air, where to risk, and where to play it safe. The judges score difficulty, execution, and, most subjective of all, style. And this is where it gets interesting. Slopestyle is the only Olympic discipline where the concept of style is an official judging criterion. Not just higher jumps, not just harder tricks, but how you do them, whether there is a personality in it. That's the question the judges are asking, and it's the question this sport poses to the entire Olympics. Can sport have not only a rule book, but also a soul? The United States, Canada, and Norway have traditionally dominated slopestyle. But this is also where upsets happen most often, because young athletes arrive every 4 years with a new movement vocabulary. What seemed impossible at the last Olympics becomes a required element at the next. Progress in slopestyle does not move in small steps, it comes in leaps, and Milan Cortina is almost certain to bring us another one. Moguls might be the most brutal sport at the Winter Games, and I don't mean speed or the height of the jumps. I mean what it does to your body every split second of the run. The Moguls course is a steep slope covered in bumps that are not random but shaped into neat lines on purpose. You charge through them at maximum speed, and every bump slams into your legs with a force you could compare to dropping off a stair step every half second. In 20 seconds your legs take dozens of those hits. At the same time, you have to keep your upper body almost perfectly still. Arms calm, no panic. Flawless technique. Because the judges are watching everything. What makes it even harder is that in the middle of the course there are 2 jumps. After a violent section of bumps, you launch into the air and must execute a trick. They judge height, cleanliness of the move, and the landing, and then back into the bumps, all the way to the finish, flat out. Moguls entered the Olympic program in 1992 in Albertville, and since then this discipline has delivered some of the most emotional stories of the Winter Games. Canadians and Australians are constant contenders here, which is strange in itself. Australia and winter sports sound like a paradox. Yet Australian skiers have proved more than once that geography is not a life sentence in sport. The real life sentence is when you let yourself believe you don't stand a chance. Moguls do not forgive that kind of thinking. Take a look at where all these sports come from and you'll see a world map appear almost by itself. Alpine skiing, the Alps, biathlon, the military traditions of the north, skeleton, St. Moritz, one small hotel, and bored tourists at the end of the 19th century, curling, Scotland, frozen ponds, the 16th century, ski jumping and cross-country skiing, Norway and its 8,000 years on snow, speed skating, the frozen canals of the Netherlands, where people once traveled faster on blades than on horseback, snowboarding, California's mountains and surf culture, which one day looked at snow and said, why not? All these disciplines were born in places where winter is not a nuisance but a way of life. In Scandinavia, there is the concept of friluftsliv, life in the open air. It is more than just going for a walk. It is a philosophy of unity with nature, the belief that a person reaches their fullest life only when they learn to feel at home outside in any conditions. Winter strips everything down to the essentials. On a mountain slope there are no external factors, no phone, no yesterday's grievances. There is only snow, speed, and you. This is what psychologists call the flow state, when the body does everything on its own and the mind simply watches. Buddhists call it samadhi, Taoists call it wu wei. Athletes just say, I was completely in it. 16 sports, 16 different answers to one question. What did you discover about yourself when there was nothing around you but cold, speed, and emptiness? February 2026, Milan, Cortina, the Dolomites. And we're only beginning to understand what truly lies behind all of this. If this video resonated with you, share it with someone who cares about real sport, not just final scores. And drop a comment, which of the 16 sports grabs you the most, and why? Part 2 is coming soon, we're going even deeper.